Here on KBC Channel 1, you are in time for BizCheck. My name is Betty Kiptum and Lensa Odingo is my colleague on the sign language interpretation. Now, over the next 2 hours, we shall be discussing the economic outlook for 2024. Of course, the World Bank forecasts that Kenya will have a 5.2% growth this year, and Sanlam Investments released a report last week. They forecast around 5.3%, as well as many other forecasts that have been released over the past few weeks. We shall be discussing what will be driving this growth, the risks that exist in our market as well as globally. And to have this conversation is James Akelo. He is a portfolio manager at Sanlam Investments East Africa, as well as Alex Kanyi, who is a partner at CDH Kenya. Thank you very much, gentlemen, for joining me.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Karibu sana. So let's start with the global outlook first of all, yeah?
Sure.
The World Bank forecasts a slowdown to 2.4% this year. I'll start with you, James. What are your thoughts on that?
I think what we have gone through is a period of high rebound in growth, especially after the pandemic. So probably that is why the pace of growth is slowing down. But I'd say it's more or less normal, the normal expectations of world growth. In addition to that, I think we've also had the impact of geopolitical tensions that, of course, have also pushed back on growth. So tension between Russia and Ukraine has also played a big impact on that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Right. I would like to get your thoughts as well, Kanyi.
Well, I think it's optimistic, given what is happening around the world, inflation everywhere. But at the same time, I think it's not quite predicting like a huge growth, so still reasonable.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
There, of course, you mentioned the geopolitical tensions, and some of them have a direct impact on our market here in Kenya and the region as well. There's the Russia-Ukraine war, there's the Israel-Palestine war, and then there are conflicts as well around the region. How do you see that panning out for maybe the East African region? Yourself, Kanyi.
I think from the East African region, from a global perspective, we have to look at our country and East Africa by extension being net importers. So basically, if we are relying on whatever is being produced, especially from those countries that are experiencing some form of conflict, of course we'll get into challenges. So, and now when you talk about the Russias and the Ukraine and the wheat and the foodstuffs that would get from there, of course that tells you that the cost of basic items here within the country will be a little bit high because we don't produce enough to take care of our market. Mm-hmm. And from an East African perspective, you see what is happening in Ethiopia as an example. And for that, you're looking at investors looking at an East African region and thinking of, if I want to invest large scale, do I still think of East Africa as a good market? And, so they are taking their time also in terms of decision making, and our cycles for elections and what that means within the East African region. So that's something else. And of course, I don't want to mention if there's any influence that comes from outside. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Right. Yourself, Akelo, yes.
Yes. So I think Alex has covered it quite well, whereby with tensions and globalization as a whole, supply and demand for certain goods, items will definitely pick up. Like is explained, of course, with Russia and Ukraine, that impacted to a point oil prices, price of wheat, and the region being a net commodity importer, that definitely hits on the current accounts balances for the countries.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Of course, there are supply disruptions currently in the shipping line, the Gaza Strip and the Red Sea shipping line that has been disrupted. How is that going to impact the commodity prices? I mean, seeing that we are a net importer.
With what we're seeing in terms of ships going around Africa instead of using the Suez Canal, that just increases the cost of transportation for delivering these commodities to countries like us. Mm-hmm. That's where the impact will be. So we'll definitely see pressure in commodity prices going up. But I think the world as a whole is trying to see how some of these conflicts or these areas of conflicts can be addressed and quickly. And that I believe will also hasten the pace in terms of how commodity prices also react.
You have thoughts?
Yeah. So any delay in getting whatever products that I'm looking at it from a point of manufacturing as an example. So any delay in getting my inputs into the factory for me to be able to produce and thereafter sell and release things into the market means that one, demand is affected, because now you have all these people who want your products, but you cannot actually be able to produce to meet that particular demand. What that means is also the prices will definitely increase. And if I'm looking at the production perspective, I'm also saying if I'm producing less, how do I ensure that I continue to meet my fixed costs? It means that I also have to put an element into my pricing to make sure that my business stays afloat. What that means is the final consumer of my product, whatever that is, then is affected in terms of the pricing and the inflation that goes around with it. Yeah.
Now, let's take there with the geopolitical issues or risks that we are facing. There are elections that are coming up. Over 60 countries are having elections this year, including the US.
Yes.
How is that going to impact, especially the foreign policies? What do you foresee from that front, Akelo?
Of course, I mean, that's why the elections will impact countries like us, be it a change of guard or the incumbent keeping office. Whatever foreign policy or fiscal measures of their fiscal policy will impact countries like us. I don't want to probably get into the details on what will happen, but it definitely has an impact as a whole to Kenya and its neighbors.
Can you?
Yeah, as he explains it, with every change of guard or politics, there are promises that are being made left, right, center. There are people who have traditionally, for example, worked with African governments in the past, and that has been tested and has worked well. The others whose perhaps their working hasn't worked well. So any change, of course, affects what comes to the country, depending on their approach. You could have someone coming in concentrating on what would be like their national interest for their country, meaning there are less of incentives to African governments or African producers, for example. It could also mean perhaps more of those incentives depending on what this person is coming in as part of their policy. Yeah.
Another thing we are expecting to, or rather we are waiting to see how it affects us is the tight monetary policies, that have affected currencies. Our shilling slumped 21% last year to the dollar. Yeah. This year, what are we expecting, Akelo?
What I'll say is that we expect a gradual depreciation of the shilling, and that's also on the back of us expecting monetary policy, especially in developed markets, to start being more accommodative. So that should ease pressure on the shilling, but the gradual depreciation we expect will be at a definite slower pace than we did see in 2023.
And of course, the slumping of the shilling affects us in a number of ways. Could you just take us through that? I'll start with you, Kanye.
Well, let's just go local. I'm importing a car.
Yes.
We are not manufacturing cars here in Kenya, at least not enough. I know there are plants that are already manufacturing, and I've been involved in setting up some of them. But we import a lot of the second-hand vehicles. So the pricing is in USD or any other foreign currency, and you have this very weak shilling. And with that, of course, it makes, and back to that discussion of we are a net importer. We just import. The little we export cannot really help us with that downhill for the shilling. So any weakening of the shilling just means worse for Kenya.
And according to the CBK reports, our forex reserves have been, going down.
Almost depleted.
Yes, we are at 3.6 months import cover, and that is, of course, below the threshold that is required. What does that mean for us, Akelo?
I think maybe not as alarming as it would sound.
Okay.
Our forex reserves are currently, if I'm not wrong, maybe about $6.8 billion. Yes, we're probably below the, 4.5 months cover within the region, but it's still a much better place. We still receive our fuel imports and our fuel goods. We still import goods and services from outside. We haven't seen capital controls like in other African countries. So what I'll say is that we are receiving the necessary help from the likes of the World Bank and the IMF. This will also show up our forex reserves. And I think it's not as gloomy as probably people would paint. I think Kenya is still placed both physically and strategically. Actions are being taken by the government both on fiscal consolidation and to try address the forex situation in the country. Great.
Let's just put a peg on that a little bit. I'd like to bring David Kingo, who is an economist, into the conversation. Thank you for joining us, David. We are talking about the global outlook, and we've talked about the geopolitical issues, the elections that are coming up across various countries, including US. We are now talking about the tightening monetary environment that is impacting our shilling. Please tell us your thoughts on that.
First, thank you for this opportunity to be here. So my view about the dollar and basically in Kenya, just so isolated as a country, we've got into a situation where we are not able to cushion ourselves because the reserve that we have, they might not be very solid. Now, I see they're saying around 3 months cushion, but looking at our GDP, 17 trillion with a cushion of 3 months in terms of dollars. So if this GDP is to be sustained, of about 70 trillion, that it means we're going to strain our dollar. So we don't expect a lot of impact from elections in the US. Our situation is already domestic. Our situation is already local. Look at the monetary policy that we have in the country regarding interest rates and also fiscal frameworks where we're trying to import a lot of steel for infrastructural development. All that's are local concepts that are worsening the dollar. So the impact that we expect from the elections in other countries might not be as much to this dollar in the country because the problem is already local.
The problem is local. Akelo, you seem not to be on the same page with Kingo.
I feel like Kenya is connected to the world. So, of course, as monetary policy in the US becomes more accommodative, that will, again, still play a vital role in supporting the shilling. It also makes it a more accessible market for the government now to also look into issuing foreign debt that's more affordable. And I think probably that has been the holdback from the government trying to issue right now, that they just want global rates to be at a level whereby it would be affordable debt. We have $6.8 billion in reserves, 3.6, I think it's about 3.6 or 3.5 months of import cover. Economic growth is not just driven by forex spending. It's also by local spending by the government, creating jobs, government doing projects. So it's not holistically just tied to our forex reserves. There are other measures and other areas that government still is focusing on to ensure that there's still economic growth. So I think even looking at Kenya, the projection is about 5.3%, you said. Mm-hmm. So that's still more or less in line with our historical numbers. We've had a big recovery probably after COVID. I think we hit a high of 7.5, but it's starting to moderate to historical levels of about between 5 and 5.5%.
Right. I like that we have nicely gone into the local growth projections that there are 5.3%. What are the areas that will be driving this growth? Akelo, then I'll give it to Kanye.
The largest sector still remains agriculture, financial services. You look at banks. Banks last year more or less started recording the biggest profits, and it will more or less still be focused within the major pillars within the economy, and agriculture still remains as a key fundamental or a key sector within the economy. Yeah.
Kanye, you want to chime in on that?
Yeah, you know, we speak about banks, and for a moment I thought where their money is coming from. And if I was to consider the reports about guys and defaulting on loans, and you know, that means that you know, the banks are actually selling off guys' properties, etc., and perhaps explains where they are getting their money. And remember, now banks have turned to this thing they call the risk-based lending, and you know, getting a loan already is painful enough, and the rates that they're actually demanding in terms of those loans are actually a lot. So yes, banks will continue to do well. We've had some good rains. I'm hoping that the agricultural sector will also come in to boost you know, our revenues and the GDP. So I think those two, like he mentions, would be key to watch.
Right. Yourself?
Basically, as my friend talked about, agriculture is still a sector that we rely on as a country. But when you look at the potential in agriculture in terms of we only export raw product, the final product we don't do, we have marginal of that. So basically it's a sector that can be really exploited for us to have an advantage. Then the other indicator about where we expect to be as an economy, look at the growth that was projected around 5 point something. So when you look at the commercial banks, those are the indicators of how the economy is performing, because I've seen the local daily, they have around 5 pages of auctioneering. Then when you go to commercial bank, the biggest loan book, you call it consumer loan book, that is of people who are salaried, and you've seen the reductions in their pay slips and all that, and the increase in interest rate. So basically, and has increased the non-performing loan to around 15%. So meaning those people who are salaried, they're not paying loan because they're basically the biggest basket in that. And the agriculture that we claim to be our basket in terms of economic growth, when you look at their loan book, it is perhaps the smallest. And I'm sure you've not had anybody coming to the office and asking you, we want you to borrow a loan for development and agriculture. They only hear about a salary loan. So this particular sector that we really rely on is not being, a lot is not being invested in for us to be able to take advantage. And the indicators are in the commercial bank statistics that we've seen. Yes.
Kanye, you are nodding in agreement. You
yes,
have thoughts on that?
But I don't know. I know we'll certainly discuss about the payslip and what is happening there.
Yes.
So that largely affects guys' disposables incomes, and therefore meaning from a tax perspective, you collect less VAT, value-added tax, because they cannot actually spend money on items. With time, you will collect less pay as you want, because the employer is also crying and saying, I cannot handle this wage bill. With time also other taxes will be affected, yeah? So it's quite something that we actually need to dive deeper.
Maybe we can actually dive into it right now. There's a report that was released, I think, early this week. It said that 73% of Kenyans are facing financial strain. Yeah, so people are not able to meet their basic needs. They're cutting down on food or whatever it is, and their expenses generally. So let's talk about the Kenyan. You know, we can be projecting 5.3% for the whole economy, but what is the Kenyan feeling?
That's interesting. I was listening to some debate yesterday, and basically what was coming out is it depends on where you are. If you're part of the guys who are doing government projects and getting the money out of that, then perhaps you don't feel anything. But if you're the person who is relying on your salary every month, then you're in trouble, because we started with the change in PAYE bands. Of course, even though that affects the guys earning about 500,000 per month and above, that is still something. Then we moved to housing levy, which again is raiding the same pay slip. Then we've now moved to the social health insurance fund, which again attempts to raid the same pay slip at about 2.75% if the regulations is something we can go by, because that's where you find the rate. And then you have seen now the focus by the government towards just the same employed people, trying to just see how they can get more from it. So that person, of course, is hurting. Then if you move to the guys who are not in formal employment, and in this case would be the majority, how are they feeling it in terms of government creating an opportunity for them to actually do business? Yeah. How are they being facilitated, for example, to get their products or to provide their services? The thing that is happening is that government now is focusing on those guys and trying to also get taxes out of them. And you've seen that, for example, through the electronic tax invoice management system, which aims to target guys within the informal sector to know how much they are earning, and also at some point to also collect tax from them. So for them, they're saying, while we try understand where the government is going with this, now we feel the government is going after the little that they already have. So they're trying to find ways to beat whatever efforts are being put by the government, and you've heard about the pay bill story already. Mm-hmm. So to them, it tells you that they were already feeling it even before we had new tax changes. And now that they're being targeted, they're saying, I make very little to afford to pay someone some tax. I come, for example, here, I'm told, paint a wall. I paint the wall, I'm given 1,000 shillings. I've already spent so much on transport to get to the venue for the job. I have children in school who want to, school fees, they want food. Food is expensive. So there's something that needs to be done to make sure that perception of we're already suffering at least is changed.
Something needs to be done. Akelo, what are your thoughts on the position where the common mwananchi is at?
What I'll probably say is that the cost of living across the world has really risen, and it's not a Kenya-specific problem. And pressure on people's pockets is also being felt across the world. We've talked about interest rates being elevated in Kenya. It's also the same in the developed markets. The quantum of which might not be the same here. So if you look at the US, probably interest rates at higher levels relative to here, but they've had near zero interest rates for over a decade. So for us, the current living situation and especially inflation has been fed in through the various factors that we've discussed earlier, which is currency. We're still a net importer, so that feeds into prices. In terms of taxes, I understand where the government is coming from, and it's part of probably the fiscal consolidation process that we put in a report in terms of trying to increase revenue collection to be able to manage the country. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Speaking
of the revenue collection bit, of course, we have the government coming with one place to channel the revenue, Mm-hmm. That means the money that used to go to people's pockets is probably coming into that pot. But what are the risks that such a system offers, to Kenyans, especially the ones who are already struggling? Others are saying the government is coming for the little that we have. What are the risks?
I'll first respond to the earlier question about e-citizen and come back to the, we call it 222 e-citizen, if I'm not wrong. So basically, about the interest rate, there is something called crowding out effect in terms of how much does government strategies kill private sector. It's a conversation, perhaps, I'm sure the economists who are leading the president, and it's a conversation they need to have, because when you look at the cost of living from the mwananchi, and to look at the two parameters, the fiscal framework and the monetary policy, because we get money through monetary policy, that's how money is able to go to mwananchi. So for the consumer person who gets loan through their payslip, of course the payslip is a bit tight, so these people will default. If this person default, this person had someone who they deployed in the village. So this person was a shamba boy perhaps, or house manager. This person had opened a kibanda for their parent at home. These parents were buying sukuma wiki from a local farmer. So the entire system is closed down because someone increased taxes for the person who was borrowing this money. Number two, the other channel that will give you an indicator of the cost of living, these business people that we call SME and SM, there are two, we have the MSE and the small and medium.
Yeah.
So they control around 25% of the GDP, that's around 5 trillion, and only 20% of these people are regulated. They are within the framework of taxing and lending. So 80% are not able to borrow, 80% are not able to pay tax, 80% they get mistreated day and night by the local authority or the national government because they are not within the framework. And these are people that we can really, as a government, go and check how much tax can we collect from these people when they are regulated. We have examples that we compare ourselves with, I think Singapore, in terms of is it social protection and safe and other aspect. But even look at their SME, something that we also need to compare. Their strength of their SME is so strong because the policies that they have, that they are able to take opportunities by the government is able to get an opportunity to how can we make money through the SME because we've given them a good framework to make business. So we need to have that particular discussion as a government in terms of because that's where the cost of living comes in. So we come back to the issue of e-citizen. I'm meant to understand this money should come back once you pay. After a few days you get back the money as an institution. So I'm not sure whether he's going to stay with whoever he is collecting or whichever framework is collecting. So we cannot sit and say that the government wants to, the money is going somewhere else. So the money, I guess, should come back. So it's only for statistical purposes that how much are you collecting at an institution. Because I'm sure, because there's the nature of size of government transactions, for the government to hold these funds can really create a lot of chaos. Because you can imagine an hospital, someone wants to a machine to do dialysis, need some repair, but the funds are held somewhere else. So I'm sure the government is not willing to go into that in that particular monkey conversation. So I meant to understand the money should come back to the organization if that has not been implemented, but it to be implemented if not yet.
But how easy is it to access this money? I mean, for a very long time, businesses have been crying that even tax refunds themselves are very hard to come by. How easy is it to access this money?
I know there are challenges there because assume you even pay with your phone, then you lose your phone. So, and then you are not able to even to retrieve those messages. How will you be able to convince whoever gave you this particular service that you literally paid? So, I think I've seen those issues on the social media, but I'm sure there is a framework for this money to come back. The only challenge that we can ask is the transaction cost. Yes, where does it go? That's the only thing that I'm sure I can ask about. But the money coming back, I think should come back after some days. Mm-hmm. Yes. After some days. Kanye, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I'm not so much conversant about money getting lost through this citizen platform, and I don't want to comment on it. But what I can mention is that the minute it was being introduced, I thought of it as a very good idea, because then you had all these government agencies with their own payment platforms and their own payment ways. And the government didn't have sight of how much money then they are getting from state agencies and things like those. So harmonizing that to come through one platform, I think it increases the level of transparency, which is also good. And from, I think, the last cabinet meeting, they were also talking about one single treasury account, meaning that they'll move away from just the citizen to say even the banking has to be monitored in a way that it goes through one single treasury account, where we can maybe put a sub account for who and so, and be able to tell how much money is coming from whatever source, so that at least we tighten some of the loopholes that have been exploited in the past. So I still think it's a good idea, and we should at least give it time to see how it is implemented, and then we can perhaps react as to its effectiveness or not.
Right.
Yeah.
And still staying with the issue of taxation, tax policies within the country right now, the tax environment, the SMEs are complaining that this is not working. And some of them, of course, you've seen them running away. The pay bill subscriptions are going down. Is it counterproductive what the government is doing in terms of tax policies?
I think for once, and on TV, national TV, I must say that we must take this painful pill. Because if at the end of the day, government will continue to look at Alex and the little that he's making because the government already knows how much Alex is making, then I'm going to get hurt in terms of my, my disposable income just getting raided all the time. So it's time we have this conversation to say, I've built a whole road from Nairobi to Narok. The people using that road are not just the employed people. You have you who is doing your produce. You have, I don't know, the transport guys. You have, guys in dealing with cows and etc. How are they contributing towards that just small road that is benefiting them? How are they contributing to that hospital at their home, which is benefiting them? How are they contributing to simple things like water that is getting to their houses? Can we just rely on the person who is employed, who left home, rural home, and went to Nairobi to continue with the kind of development that they see in their home country? So we must find a way of getting anybody within the agricultural sector or the informal sector. While it is painful, and it will be painful for some time, we must have them within the tax bracket so that if they pay just something small, then the government stops looking at the salaried person and says, at least we have some income from another source. And we've seen this within the medium-term revenue strategy for the government, 2024, 2025, 2026, 2027. So they're actually saying, yes, we are actually coming for you. And they're looking at it in various ways. For example, if you're delivering produce to your cooperative society and the society is paying you something, then the society will withhold tax when they are paying you. So they are trying to make it a little bit less painful for you to account for your own taxes, since the cooperative will deduct and then pay that tax to the government. Well, it may look like small money, at least it is something rather than nothing that we are currently getting from that particular side of the story. If you look at the ETIMS side, Electronic Tax Invoice Management System, what the government is saying is that you have all these people supplying either services or goods, but they are not paying their fair share of tax. It could be the little mama mboga there. I'm sure, the platform as it is currently, being worked on looks a little bit too hard to be adopted by the small scale people. But with time, if I'm able to generate, even if it's not just a receipt or something you can just tap. When you come to my shop, I sell you 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. The cost is 10. The government wants to collect just a little bit of VAT from it. Then you tap, then immediately there is some information moving to the KRA system and showing the tax that is also being collected from. So that if it is less onerous for someone who is doing small business to comply, let's help them, but let's make sure we also collect tax from them. Within the same medium-term revenue strategy, we've also seen if you're importing stuff into the country, they also want to levy withholding tax just on the value of the imports. So you could be going to, you've imported something small, you're into e-business, perhaps you're buying clothes from the UK, selling on your own online shop, but you've already imported the goods into the country. So while we may not get you when you're selling to everyone around, at least at the point of importing, we get something out of it. The other thing I've also seen is that even the supplies to the government, they also want to levy some withholding tax. And it's basically trying to get everybody who is getting an income to be within the radar of the revenue authority, so that at least we get something small out of it. It could be painful because they're not used to it, but it's the only way to go. I don't see it any other way.
Akelo, do you think the bitter pill must be swallowed?
What I'll say is that fiscal consolidation is imperative for the government to be able to address shortfall in either revenue collection and I think trying to diversify or widen the net in terms of how to collect revenue is what the government is going for. So Yes, to an extent, for us to be able to address the fiscal consolidation plan for the government, we have to go down this path.
Yeah. I will be getting your views, Kingo, in a little bit. Let's just take our viewers to Villarosa Kempinski, where the Kenya Private Developers Association is having a stakeholders forum there. Our very own Wairimu Njenga is on standby, and she wants to have a conversation with the Housing Secretary. Wairimu, what's the latest?
Thank you, Betty. We are live from Upper Hill, right here at Villarosa Kempinski, where we are looking at some of the key issues that developers are facing in the real estate sector. This is a meeting that has been organized by Kenya Private Developers Association as they look at various issues that real estate developers are facing. One being they are looking at streamlining approval processes, that is advancement in building plans and permits. They'll be also looking at exploring solutions for challenges in electricity connection for new projects. This is an area that will be handled by Kenya Power. They'll also be addressing housing incentives, and this is an area I want to focus on with the Housing Secretary, who is Athman Said, and he will be talking to us some of the areas that they're looking at as the government, and also look at the affordable housing agenda. Remember, this agenda is close to President William Ruto's heart, and he's been going around the country pushing for the affordable housing agenda. And to just give us an update of where we are with the affordable housing agenda is Athman here, right here with me. Athman, maybe you can start by telling us the progress update of the affordable housing, houses that are being put up across the country.
Thank you very much. I think currently we are doing very well. We are crossing over 50,000 units that are being done across the country. Virtually in every county, we have a project that is going on. Either we have a market going on, we have some affordable housing projects going on. We are rolling more this year in particular. And that's why in this particular meeting of the property developers are very important for us, to us as government, because they actually also develop. And this housing fund or housing levy is supposed to contribute towards, once they do the units, acceptable rates that are affordable to Kenyans, then the government will also be able to offtake from that. Yes.
One of the key issues that have been raised here by developers is infrastructural challenges.
Yes.
From where you sit as the government, as the public, what are you doing to ensure that these things are addressed?
I think the question raised in this forum about the fact that you cannot just put up houses, but you must also put up associated infrastructure. And indeed, the housing levy that was approved by Parliament does talk about the ability or the necessity of putting up a housing infrastructure that will support the housing. So the concern is genuine, and what the government is doing, wherever it is going, the infrastructure within that particular area, that particular scheme, that's the responsibility of the developer. But the infrastructure outside that area, if you're putting up an additional 50,000, 10,000 units, that of course will cause strain in the infrastructure in terms of water, in terms of sewage, so that then we are working together with the county governments, we are working together with the other agencies, the road infrastructure that leads to the program. So it is part of the program of affordable housing, not just putting up towers, but putting up also associated both physical infrastructure and social infrastructure. Because where will those the families, where will they go to shopping? Where will the kids go to school? What about the hospitals? So you'll find in every project it has associated physical and social infrastructure.
Okay.
Yes.
Now, you mentioned that Kenya, of course, has a housing demand of 250,000 units and an estimated supply of 50,000. That is what is being currently developed right now. You've talked about 50,000 right now that is being developed across the country. Are we likely to bridge this deficit in the near future?
Yeah, and you're right. We do have a need for 250,000 per year. The current market does 50,000, and that's why this particular government, when during campaign, they offered and they promised to put 200,000 units a year. What we are doing now are the first steps. Like I've already told you, we're about 50,000 so far. I think in about 3, 4, 5 years, we'll be going towards capacity and producing 200,000 houses every year. It is possible. It is really possible. The biggest challenge has been finding a formula, and one of the formulas that we have been able to do so far is having the levy. Because the levy then enables, as has been discussed in the meeting, that developers, when they develop at the current market rates, they only develop for a given high-end client. You have a house which is 7 million, 8 million, 9 million. That cannot be afforded by somebody who is earning 10,000 shillings, 20,000 shillings, 30,000 shillings. So the houses that we are building, we are offering to Kenyans you have a one-bedroom house at about 5,000 shillings per month on a tenant purchase scheme. 2 bedrooms at 10,000 shillings per month on a tenant purchase scheme, rent to own. 3 bedrooms at 15,000 shillings per month. It means the rent you are paying now will enable you to own a house forever. Even the person at the slum area who is currently paying 2,500 shillings per room, basically. So under social housing, that same person, we are offering them 2,500 shillings, but in a proper into decent houses. Yes.
Thank you, Said. Him talking to us about the affordable housing agenda and also mentioning the 1.5 housing levy that is being implemented, or rather, it is actually being implemented right now in the country, rather, Betty. And he will also be talking about some of the other issues that developers are facing, some of the legal reforms that needed in the housing agenda, and also they'll be looking at the electricity connections that some of the developers are saying that application process is slow. So how can they work together to ensure that the electricity connection is done before the property is developed? Now, back to you in studio, Betty.
Thank you very much, Wairimu Njenga. They are speaking to Said Asman, the Housing Secretary, and they are talking about matters housing in Kenya. Of course, the annual deficit of housing in Kenya stands at around 200,000 houses, and the affordable housing program is part of the government's effort to ensure that every Kenyan is housed. Well, we shall be seeing how that pans out, and Wairimu will be filing that report in our subsequent bulletins. We now get back to studio and continue with our conversation on matters the 2024 economic outlook with James Akelo, Portfolio Manager at Sanlam Investments East Africa, David Kingo, who is an economist, as well as Alex Kanyi, partner at CDH Kenya. Thank you, gentlemen, for staying with us. Before we joined Wairimu, then we were talking about formalizing the informal sector, or bringing them into the tax bracket. I'd like to get your thoughts, Kingo, on how this can be made possible.
I think the first concept is to understand or do a study how many people or business people in the informal sector are not within the bracket, and then get the reason why. We also need to work perhaps the national government and the county government, because when you look at the county government, they have a more penetrative network in terms of a framework that they're able to easily identify these people and maybe understand what they want for them to be in the framework. Then the tax structure, there is a canon in tax that talks about the ease of paying taxes. So once we have ease of paying taxes implemented as a canon, then we have the county government involved in terms of identifying this particular SMEs and the kind of support that they need. Then I guess through that framework we'll be able to sort the issue of the people who can come into the tax bracket, because I'm sure that they are there. And look at the statistics that talk about 7.4 million SMEs that are out there, and around 5 million they are not within the framework, and these are people who contribute to around 20% of the GDP. So basically that collaboration between the national government and the county government can be able to solve that particular issue. Yes.
There's a time I was talking to someone who deals with startups, and I asked him, is it a good time to start a business in Kenya? His outright answer was no, largely because of the tax environment, the cost of production is high and all that. So even as the government is trying to formalize or to bring the informal sector into the tax bracket, there is also the issue of choking SMEs, just killing the ones that already exist. How can we achieve this balance? I'll start with you, Akelo.
So the essence in terms of government, that the steps that have taken over the last couple of years have been positive in my view. You look at the central bank, whereby I believe it was in 2019 or 2020, whereby they spoke to banks and banks had to allocate a certain portion of their portfolio to lending to SMEs so that they have access to capital. I think what we've also seen is a lot of interest by private equity firms that have been able to build up businesses over the last couple of years. You look at Java, it was a mom and pop shop, and now it has several branches across Kenya. You look at businesses like CJ's, Art Cafe, even the likes of certain financial institutions. We're definitely seeing investments in SME businesses, and there's been a lot of interest to drive them. I think, can the environment be more conducive? Yes, but I believe government is trying their best in terms of trying to support them. Unfortunately, we can say that the environment that we're in right now is maybe slightly a little bit not conducive for growth. But I believe, just like other African countries, we're feeling the pain points. I think we were talking about inflation earlier. Inflation in Kenya as of December was 6.6%. You look at Ghana. Ghana had inflation of 56%, coming down to 20%. Nigeria, one of the largest economies within Africa, has inflation of over 20%. So I think we're not doing as bad relative to probably other counterparties within the continent. More can always be done by government to entice SME businesses. But what I'll say is that we're going through a normal business cycle, or through a normal market cycle, whereby things are a little bit tough, but the environment will become more conducive, of course, as we were speaking about earlier, monetary policy becoming more accommodative.
Kanye, your thoughts?
In terms of balancing, and I believe that was the question.
Yes.
You have to look at, how do I incentivize people to still do business, get an income, and therefore collect revenue from that, vis-a-vis also targeting the same people who are saying that I think I'm already overtaxed. Yeah. So to me is to, and I think the government is already trying to do it in terms of ease of doing business within the country. How do we ensure that it is easy for me to start a business, register that business, not only with the register of companies, but even for tax? And also, how is it easy for me to comply from a tax perspective, so that even if I didn't go to school, I'm still able to use a very simple platform, or even a USSD kind of form of prompt within the phone, to be able to also account for my taxes. Another incentive is just to make sure that I have somewhere to take my produce, I have somewhere to take my services. People are well off, at least, to buy whatever I'm selling. So that's the focus I think the government should be having at the moment, to make sure that I thrive from whatever small business I do. Is it possible? I think so, but perhaps with time. And to the guys who are not earning much, then a lot of taxpayer education around why is it important for you to be within this tax bracket. Let's have a conversation as to where I'm taking your money once we've collected that money. I can be able to show you we've done 1, 2, 3. Let's enhance that public participation when you're coming up with projects that benefit you as a local community. It's not just, wow, they've built a road. You're not involved, perhaps the road doesn't help you. But if you're involved, perhaps the local community would have said we would have preferred a school instead. So that then I'm connected to what the government is doing, and therefore I'm happy to also contribute to that. And you contribute to that through paying taxes. Yeah, so that conversation needs to happen. I've seen a lot of focus around the tax area and what the government is doing. I haven't seen equal focus around budgeting and prioritization of government spending and the local people getting involved, so that once we connect those two, then I think it will work. Yeah.
Speaking of government spending, well, our biggest problem right now is debt. And a lot of these efforts to collect as much revenue as we can is because we have, debt obligations we have to honor. Kenya's debt position, I'd like us to delve more into that and how it's going to impact the economy this year. Start with you, Akelo.
I think if you look at our debt split, it's about 50-50, maybe slightly leaning more towards foreign debt and relative to domestic debt. We have seen the cost of borrowing probably increase, but again, this has matched what has happened also in other African countries and across the world as interest rates go up. What I'd say probably is that the concern typically has not been on domestic debt, it has been on foreign debt and our ability to be able to collect forex to repay that debt. And the support that we've gotten from DFIs, those are development financial institutions such as your World Bank and IMF, whereby the World Bank has committed over $12 billion over a 3-year period, and those are at concessional rates. You have the IMF that has committed about 638 million. So these are, and I think the government especially, sorry, just tracking back a little bit, but I think if you look at the last couple of years, especially even post-pandemic, the government has been trying to lean on more concessional debt to make it more affordable for them. And I think this has been a positive move by the government, trying to move away from commercial loans. So these commitments that we have are things that will help us especially address the forex, our foreign debt position. So I think the government has moved quite quickly to be able to get or source for these funds, and I think that at least gives the market confidence, especially looking at our foreign obligations over the next coming year and beyond.
Right, Kingo and Kanyi, I shall be getting your reactions in a little bit. We want to take a quick break here on BizCheck. When we come back, this conversation continues. Do stay with us.
motopie ukajua gari ni yangu.
Hiyo haikuwa kazi yangu.
No, ndio hiyo mimi nauliza wewe.
Yes,
Sasa mimi hapo na hapo kumbe nilikuwa nimegundua my eyes is not see. Why?
So inamaanisha kuwa
Why?
Inamaanisha kuwa
shut up, I'm talking shut up.
Wewe. Sasa wewe ulikunywa gani?
Mimi nilikunywa hiyo kili mimi fiki. Hebu niangalie vizuri uniambie kama unanijua. Hebu niende ni yuko hapa.
Anakuangalia na nini? Hii ni kazi ya Mungu. Kwa sababu aliambia pasta wetu ameokoka.
Niliokoka kuanzia hapo kwa
pale ulipopotea macho.
Pale nilipotezea macho nikaopokea hapo.
Na macho yakirudi?
Macho yakirudi tutafikiria hiyo maneno mheshimiwa.
Ewe mwadha, wajua mambo ambayo binadamu anapaswa kuyatekeleza ili aweze kujikurubisha na Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala.
Watafuta radhi za Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, zitafute kwa wazazi wako wawili. Waitafuta janna ya Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, itafute kwa
Thank you very much for staying with KBC Channel 1. This is BizCheck. My name is Kiptum. In studio, we are having a conversation on matters, the economic outlook for 2024. World Bank projects about 5.2% growth. Sanlam released their report last week. They projected 5.3% growth, and we are delving into the risks, the opportunities that the economy has this year. And before we went on break, we were talking about the debt burden that Kenya has. And I'd like to get now your thoughts. David Kingo, who is an economist, tell us your thoughts on the impact of the debt burden that we have on the economy this year.
This is what I would say, that there's one statement that was made by the Vice President a few weeks ago. And we can complain about the government, but there are those things that they are doing right, of course. He said that the president can go out of this country as many times as possible because the benefits he brings on board, they are more than the cost incurred for this particular trip that he makes. And this is a concept that the cost of loan that we get from foreign initiatives is way lower than borrowing within this country. And maybe we look at where is the problem. So if we got along from any country, I guess it was China perhaps, I don't remember well, to build the Thika Highway. And that loan specifically to build the Thika Highway. Before we did the highway, Garden City Mall was not there. TRM was not there. The estates around that particular roads were not there. All the way to Thika and past Thika, all those businesses were not there. So if this loan was supposed to be paid by tax, how many new businesses did this particular road create? There are millions of businesses, true or false. So the ability of the new business that have been created to pay this loan, of course it is there, and the road has surpassed its rate of return. So if that loan was purposely used for that road exactly, then we have benefit for that particular loan. That is foreign borrowing. Now the concept is we borrow, and perhaps how the money is used, maybe that's where the challenge comes in. And then the project that we initiate, they don't have an equivalent rate of return in terms of multiplier effect, creating various new businesses that can be able to create, to pay this particular facility. So borrowing from outside is the best and the only option that we have as a country. What happened next, and the other option is, if we are not able to borrow from outside, then we borrow locally. The money that David and other SME people could have gone to borrow from commercial bank, they are given to the government. So me and a million others, we close our business. So now the loan that we borrowed locally needs to be paid. From where? And the million and David and a million others have closed their businesses. So that's where now the problem comes. The conversation of crowding effect also come on board. So the debt issue is, which project have we done that can be able to create businesses that can be taxed, avenues for government to generate revenue to pay this particular facility, rather than internal borrowing. Internal borrowing is self-suicidal for an economy. So it's not anything that we can advocate for. So the debt is there. The issue is that can we have austerity measures as a country? And then they need to have a limit that we are initiating these austerity measures to pay these facilities up to a certain point in time. We don't say we are going to tax you to pay debts, but you don't have to end. So maybe we have austerity measures that are pegged on time. We can have that conversation to seal the issue of foreign debts. But foreign debts are not any problem. Yes, we can get as much as we can, and that's why the Deputy President said so, rather than borrowing internally. Because internal borrowing is quite suicidal for an economy. Yes, because people will even ask, why is interest rate going so high? And remember, when the interest rates go high, I'm not able to borrow me as a person, as a business person, because the ability of my business to pay me and also to pay these facilities that are borrowed is not there. And remember, the economic environment is not that particularly stable. So, but if the commercial banks have enough supply of money, liquidity to lend, of course the money is there to lend, so basically the interest rate will come down. So it's a conversation that needs to be looked at in terms of, because it affects everything when we don't borrow from outside. Then the other issue that I said earlier is, we borrow this money, how do we spend? Can we have an example of Thika Superhighway being shown and statistics driven? We borrowed this much, we have been able to generate new business this much, so allow us as government to borrow again to do A, B, C, D. Yes, and these are the statistics, this is what we expect.
All right.
Yes.
Kanye, I'd like you to get your thoughts on Kenya's debt position.
Like I've said before, I think the focus should be on the spending. So we borrow, yes, and then when you look at how we are spending budget-wise, 65% or even more is going towards recurrent expenditure, meaning loans and the salaries. Yeah, so leaving very little for development. So what King O, for example, is expecting to see as development perhaps might not come, because you can clearly see that we are taking Fuliza to deal with the Mshwari, not particularly taking it towards doing a particular project that everyone can see. So I still maintain that point in terms of looking at the spending bit. So you can, even at a personal level, it's the same concept. If you borrow to then use that money in a not so wise way, of course you'll be left with a debt and perhaps something worse than where you were before actually taking the money in terms of the loan. So it's time again. Perhaps we encourage the Auditor General to do her work and to actually highlight where we are not spending our money wisely, and again also focus a lot on public participation around spending.
Spending. Okay, that seems to be the song here, you know, the prudence of our spending. How can we improve that?
Probably increasing the budget on development expenditure, trying to look at efficient ways to address recurrent expenditure. But like you said, in terms of development expenditure, there are definitely several infrastructure projects that have come up and have promoted business or have brought economic activity to an area that was not there. So probably that's the best way we can look at it, trying to focus most of our spending on pillars of the economy that we believe will drive growth. The Big Four agenda is definitely something that, if focused on, will drive economic growth. So I do agree with my counterparts that, yes, government has come a long way in terms of improving efficiency in tax collection, but they can also look at ways how they can address the pockets of areas of opportunities within the economy of where to channel funds.
Let's talk a little bit more about the crowding out effect. I mean, the government is borrowing locally and at very attractive rates, say, to investors. How is this impacting the liquidity of especially businesses?
It's a competing need, I guess, whereby we've been through various market cycles. We've been in market cycles where interest rates are low and more or less that incentivize banks to lend more to the private sector. The cycle that we're in right now probably pushes investors more towards to lend to government. But I think one key thing to note is that even as you look at loan growth books for banks, it's still been growing at a double-digit figure even in 2023, looking at Q3 earnings for banks. So what I'll say is that it's still a competing need, but I wouldn't say they have completely crowded out the sector to a point whereby banks do not want to lend to individuals or SMEs or big corporates. There is still access for individuals and businesses. Again, it's just that it's a market cycle, as I explained earlier.
Right. Kanyi Kingo mentioned that domestic borrowing at some levels could be suicidal. What are your thoughts on that?
I guess government looking at options. If it's easier to get the money locally, even though it is expensive, then you go for that particular option. Suicidal maybe in terms of whether everyone else can be able to still get access to funds, either from banks, for example, whether that money is actually available for them. If the money is available, like Akelo says, then we should be okay. But clearly, if you are a business person, then you have to prioritize. And I'm assuming that even the banks are also business people. They're looking at where do I invest to get the highest returns at the minimal risk. So if we started by saying 73% of our people already in financial distress, it's an indicator that this group of people will not perhaps be able to pay back whatever they get as loans. So it could also explain why there's an increase in loans to guys, but again, it's people who are struggling. So at the end of it, they will not be able to pay. So as a business person sitting in the bank, then I have to think of, do I continue with this particular trend and perhaps have more non-performing loans in my books, or do I rather go with a safe pair of hands that is a little bit risk-free? So that, when you look at it over time, of course, will impact anyone who needs financing to do anything or any business. And if that financing is not there, then of course it tells you that these businesses struggle, then die.
Mm-hmm. Part of the debt burden we have this year is the maturing Eurobond. And of course, when you talk about the international loans, there's the impact of the dollar fluctuation or the shilling depreciation on our debt. I mean, when the shilling to the dollar increases by, say, a shilling, we see 30 billion shillings or more, increase on our debt burden. How can we, first of all, how are we even dealing with this to start with? I'll start with you, Akelo.
So, how the government has gone about especially accessing foreign debt over the last couple of years is through concessional debts from DFIs, development financial institutions such as World Bank, IMF, Trade and Development Bank, AFDB. And the positive thing about concessional rates, they're almost either near zero or at least 1% or 2%. So it's much more affordable than probably a commercial or more market, trying to tap market debt. What I'd say is that there are steps that the government has taken, especially in terms of trying to entice the market. So part of the reason why local interest rates have gone up is to offer competitive rate relative to investing in the dollar, so that local investors can sell off their forex holdings and buy more shillings. In terms of also what has been done to address debt, of course, the unpopular decision by trying to increase revenue through taxes for the government has also been a step. But generally, what I would say is that maybe taking a step back on the earlier conversation, local debt, taking up local debt is not detrimental to an economy. It's normal world over. You look at major economies like the US, over 200% of their debt, their debt to GDP is over 200%. Japan, the same. I think it's just the steps that your government takes to try address servicing of debt. For us, yes, foreign debt in the last couple of years, probably excluding 2023, has been cheap. And that's because the depreciation of the shilling hasn't been significant. Maybe cost of foreign debt has been expensive in 2023. But of course, what we expect is that under normal market environment, whereby the shilling is not under pressure, because so much has happened world over. The geopolitical tension between Russia and Ukraine has affected commodity prices, which raised inflation in global economies, and that has had a ripple effect to how the shilling has also performed. But of course, if you see things like oil prices come down, we spend less in terms of trying to import oil. And that more or less leads to our forex reserves also starting to show up. So I just think that we're in a tough market cycle. Things are looking a little bit better, at least going forward. More opportunistic in terms of the steps that have been taken by government, and at least seeing other international organizations supporting us is a plus. It shows that the government is doing the right things to support economic growth. Yeah.
Kingo, are you as optimistic as Akilo is?
Basically, first on the issue of the rate we borrowed funds at the rate we are today. Of course, we pay at the rate today, not unless the agreements so that to pay at the spot rate, the rate that we got the funds at that time. So I've only seen spot rate being used in grants where we agree we give you this money at 140 something per dollar. So we have always to transact with that particular spot rate. So of course it is to our disadvantage that the dollar keeps on increasing. The other issue about, I really want to demystify about the local borrowing. And I want to use real example that at least we can all be on the same page. My friend here works with an investment bank, or rather an investment company, true. So because we've both commercial banks and investment banks, and these are the two differences. When you go to a commercial bank, they talk about we can give you loan, you do business. So, but when you go to investment banks, they ask you for money to invest and then give you a return. So they are two different, they look at two different ways. So there is an aspect we call private equity. So for example, the investment company has collected some money from investors, blah, blah, they have put in their money market or unit trust, expecting some interest at some point. So this investment firm is holding around 500 million. So they are looking, where do we put this money? So then they are approached by two people. One is a supermarket perhaps that wants 200 million to go and establish new retail chains across the country. Look at the number of employment this particular entity is going to create. Look at the number of suppliers that are going to put their items in these stores. Look at the number of people that are going to be employed and employ other people because they have also created their own small businesses. So these 200 million, there is two people who want it. One, private equity from their institution to this particular entity. Number two, to government. So if we give this particular institution that we call, just given an example of a retail shop, so there are some risk. This business might collapse midway and we don't get back our funds, even though there are security mechanisms toward that. Then if we give government, of course we'll get back our money after the end of the tenure at our interest. We're not going to lose anything. And furthermore, we are not even going to have an officer who is going to be following up with the government. We are sure we have done our document, we'll get back our money when that time comes. This private entity, we have to get an officer who has to keep on following the performance of this institution, that we don't lose our money. So where will this institution invest? Government, of course, because it is favorable. So at the expense of this entity that could have created so much business. Remember, government also has an option of collecting taxes and funding this investment they want to fund, because they are still collecting taxes. So crowding out effect is now this concept. You have collected tax, that is one. You have come for the money that should have been given to this retail shop, that is two. So we have killed this retail shop. That is crowding out effect now. That's how it affects. Number two, when you look at the income from commercial banks, there are two aspects revenue stream for commercial bank. One is funded income, number two is non-funded income. Non-funded income is interest income that they have invested somewhere. Could be in those investment companies, could be in treasury bills and bonds. So the growth in commercial banks revenue, perhaps it is from the growth in unfunded income. We need to understand that. So number three, the other aspect is this particular commercial banks has 4 billion that they want to lend. They have closed our financial year. We have 4 billion of deposits that we want to face the market and lend Mama Mboga as land, boda. But then there is someone here who comes called the treasury bonds and bills that they are telling me as a commercial bank, give me your money. I'll pay you after 1 year, and I want the entire portfolio of 2 billion. Give me that money. You can buy different papers across a year, and then you have your 4 billion or 2 billion invested. So it is at whose expense? If these 2 billion, instead of going to perhaps to government, if they say no, for us as commercial bank, we don't want to give you, because we have customers here who will borrow 10,000, 50,000, 20,000. How many people will borrow 2 billion? In terms of 10,000, 50,000, you can get the numbers. Yes. How many businesses will be created by this over 6 million people who have borrowed? Multiply by 2 million businesses extra. But where did the money go? On the other side. So these 2 million people, 8 million initiatives of business that could have been created, they are not created because of that particular competition. Remember, our biggest entrepreneurial basket, our biggest innovative basket, our biggest tax basket is SMCs, and I keep that particular conversation. So if we are not able to give this money to these people, because the only source of capital is credit for them. You cannot tell me an SME will go to their family and ask, perhaps I'm doing a business. Can I tell my uncle to sell his matatu to give me money so that I can go and invest in my business? No. The only source of capital for these people is credit. And then there is someone who they are competing with called government. So the government should not compete with these people. Yes, that's the concept.
I hear you. Yes. I hear you, Kingo. I will give you an opportunity, Akelo, to give us a rejoinder on that. But first, we want to take the viewer to Kwale County. I'm informed that particular story will be coming to us a little bit later. Well, Akelo, please give us your thoughts on what Kingo has just said.
What I'd say is that I want to clarify probably a couple of things. Yeah. So an investment bank is an institution that is licensed to do several things. There's a corporate finance aspect where they are able to raise debt on behalf of companies who are their clients. There are some investment banks that are also licensed to also do fund management business, whereby you manage assets, be it pension for an individual, a wealthy a company that has extra cash that they want to deploy. And generally, if you're looking at an investment bank and the ability to probably been able to raise capital in the market, I would say that the current investment environment is just not conducive. And the reason being is if you are lending to an individual or a corporate, you price off current government securities. So it might be expensive right now. But probably what I'd want to do is ask my counterpart, David, if you look back the last several years, there's so many companies that have come to the market to issue debt. We've had Aecon, we've had EABL. Those have created opportunities in terms of job creation. Aecon is building student housing across Nairobi. That has created jobs. So I do understand the need for probably government appetite for local debt to reduce. And of course, in an ideal world, government should collect revenue, spend, and even have a surplus. But that's quite rare to find. And again, that's in an ideal world. There's no, even the largest economies in the world, they all run deficits, and deficits are what spur government spending or economic growth. I don't think, from a banking institution point of view, it's as gloom as he paints it. You can imagine you deposit your money in a bank, or your payroll goes to a bank, and you ask them for a loan, and they say no. You will look for another bank. Yeah? So banks are still lending. The way he puts it is almost like, today a bank is going to turn you away, yet you have your salary in an account somewhere, in an account. So I still believe that even in this current environment, I think it's just reflecting and saying, can I afford the rate that the bank is offering? Yeah.
Right. All right, thank you very much. Kanya, I'll come to you in a bit. I'm informed that we need to go to Kwale County, where Raila Odinga is on his coastal tour. It is the 4th day of that particular tour. Delegates are arriving. And our very own Junei Karisa has been following that tour and brings us the latest now from Kwale County. Junei, if you can hear me, please go ahead and update us what is going on there.
Good morning, Betty. We are coming to you live from Kwale County in Diani, where opposition leader Raila Odinga is expected here as he continues with his 4th day Coast Region tour, where he has been mopping up numbers for the ODM registration drive ahead of the grassroots elections slated for April. Yesterday we were in Kilifi County, the previous day he was in Tana River, and on Monday he was in Lamu County, and he has been traversing the whole of the Coast Region just to appeal to the voters to enlist as ODM members so that they can participate in that particular exercise that is slated for April. Now, yesterday, the bone of contention was one of the issues that the opposition chief mentioned was the alleged or the bilateral talks that took place between the top arms of government. We could see the Chief Justice, the Speaker, the Council of Governors Chair, amongst other top leadership of this country in State House, together with President William Ruto, and they were discussing. After that, we have seen headway or inroads in the judiciary sector, as we have seen the appointments of new judges in that particular arm of government. Now, yesterday, the opposition leader was criticizing this move, saying that the executive was interfering with the administration of these arms of government, which are supposed to be independent, just urging those in leadership position to take their stands and use the laid down regulations and laid down rules that have been stipulated in the constitution. That was the discussion yesterday, and of course the different leaders that are accompanying the opposition leader kept on talking about it. We have the Secretary General of the ODM party, Edwin Sifuna, also putting out his voice. Mohamed Faki, the Senator of Mombasa, Likoni Member of Parliament, Mishi Mboko, amongst other leaders, they kept on weighing in the matter, saying that in as much that those tets or relations that are very cordial between the executive and judiciaries are going on in the country, there is need also to follow the laid down rules and regulation as per that arm of government. So that was the discussion yesterday. The previous day, the issue of Junet Mohammed and Hassan Joho absenteeism in a party meetings or party meetings with the delegates, or when it comes to making partner decisions within the party, was a very big issue. There were allegations that these two different leaders had been served with show cause letters on explaining as to their absence of their absence in the ODM party. However, the ODM party boss Raila Odinga came in full swing to take a stand and say that Junet and Hassan Joho had already given him notice as to where they were, and that the party was okay and there were no cracks within the ODM party. So those are main issues that are coming up. Of course, the rest of the issues are what the opposition leaders have been continuously talking about, matters of cost of living, them lamenting matters taxes. They commented on the housing levies, amongst other pertinent issues that are continuing in the country. Also, the Mount Kenya politics also came into play, and they were commentating on the division that is currently being experienced within the two factions between the Deputy President Rigathi Gachagua as well as Didi Nyoro, who some of the leaders of the Mount Kenya region are fronting to be Deputy President come 2027. What the opposition leader is insisting is that we shouldn't, the country should move on from an electioneering period. It is too early for them to start these talks. Just advising these politicians to put these matters to rest and wait until 2027 so that the country can continue. And also, they commented that there is no seat that has been set aside for the Mount Kenya region, but it is a seat that can be occupied by any leader across the country. So today we are waiting to see what issues they will be talking about. Of course, we are giving you these live proceedings at the top of the hour at 1 o'clock. We will be giving you these details. Right now, he is addressing delegates in Matuga, some miles away from here in Kwale. He is addressing delegates. From there, he will be coming here at the Diani Reef Hotels, where, as you can see behind me, delegates are seated, waiting they're waiting for his arrival. He is accompanied by a host of many leaders from across the region, from Mombasa County, from Kwale, and of course, Kilifi County. So we are waiting. This region is an UDA affiliated. However, the ODM party believes that it can make inroads. So we are giving you those live proceedings as soon as we have the ODM chief in this building. We are at the Diani Reef, and as soon as he makes his way inside the building, we'll be giving you those live proceedings. But as for now, Betty Kiptum, I hand it back to you as we wait and keen to see which issues will be discussed in the whole day here and during the rally. Back to you, Betty Kiptum.
Thank you. Thank you very much, June Karisa there, coming to us from Kwale County, where the ODM party is on a national recruitment drive for party members, and it's led by party leader Raila Odinga. And of course, as June said, she shall be giving us updates on how that pans out as the day goes. We now want to take you to KICC, where the government spokesperson, Isaac Mwaura, is having his briefing. Let's listen into that.
40% of the cost. Similarly, the Act ensures fairness by introducing a modest 2.2 upward adjustment for 46% is already happening, actually, because the Act is in place. You are going to have more hustlers paying 300 rather than 500. Fund of first tier of people who are at the bottom is really an enactment of the universal health coverage program under the plan that is envisaged in our manifesto. And also 54% of any other contributor from 300 upwards are going to benefit from a reduced amount of money. So they are going to get it because 3/4 of Kenyans earn 50,000 shillings and below. So they actually benefit more. It's only 46% of Kenyans who are going to have a marginal increase by 2.2% on average, all of them combined. But then the people, equity issue that has been happening that we need to emphasize under this fund is that people are up to a maximum of 100. So if you pay the same amount, minimum wage, the people who %5, yet some 1 million shillings. The system has been subsidized by the hustlers for the benefit of those who are unchanged, because gain for hustlers. And the adjustment of these contributions aligns with the broader healthcare landscape, where is distributed more fairly across the population, and this is indeed the true hustler spirit. The Social Health Insurance Fund will also 1, 2, and 3 and actually
We apologize for that hitch there. We'll try to sort it out and get back to Isaac Maura's briefing a little bit later. But in studio, we continue with our conversation here on matters the economic outlook for 2024. And we are talking about the crowding out effect in terms of domestic borrowing. Alex Kanyi, the partner at CDH Kenya, I'd like to get your thoughts on this, please.
On government borrowing, I think I have two reactions. One, we cannot continue to compare our debt to GDP ratio with developed countries like the US and Japan. And the reason for this is, one, they are quite mature economies. The countries have been there 200 to 400 years. Kenya has just been there for a few years. And they have these systems that encourage accountability and transparency. So even though the country is borrowing a lot, then there's some form of transparency and accountability, and some form of good governance that goes with it. In those economies, for example, you get mentioned in a scandal that money has been lost. What do you see? Resignations, heads rolling. Here you see someone being accused of wasting public funds. They go back to their communities, our community that is getting targeted. So we cannot then say that we borrow as much as the US or the Japans of these worlds are borrowing when we haven't put our house in order. So we are not there yet, and therefore we shouldn't encourage that kind of high level of borrowing. So that's one. The other thing in terms of reacting to crowding out, and this is just an experience that I've seen with a business, yeah? So fine, you go to the banks and they're saying they'll be able to give you loans. What I've seen is the banks are quick to tailor-make a product, but when you get to actual getting the loan, it's problematic. So it's, they tell you we can actually give you this because we have funds to, for example, fund farmers to get into farming and etc. But when now the actual farmer comes to the bank to ask for that money, the kind of documentation that is being asked, the kind of loan processing fees and other fees that come with just getting that loan is already prohibitive. And you have not even talked about the interest that comes at the end of the day. Remember, for anyone who is into business, you want to make sure that whatever income you're getting from a business is at least higher than the inflation rate for it to make sense, yeah? So that if you're then borrowing at 18, 19%, and then get into a business that can only give you 5%, are you in business? You're not in business. So, and banks also know that, and that's the reason why they won't give you the money. So that crowding out effect is real, and it's already happening. Yeah.
Right. Before we end the conversation, let's talk about matters real estate. The Sanlam report gave a negative sentiment in terms of investing in real estate this year, save for education and health and the health sector's portfolios of real estate. I'd like you to get your thoughts first, starting with you, Akelo. How did you, or rather, why did you come up with this sentiment as Sanlam?
So it's comparing it to different asset classes. So it's just not looking at real estate solely alone.
Yes.
So looking at the opportunities you have with government securities within the equities market and offshore markets, we felt that the return on investment that you'd be able to get on real estate is not as strong or as appealing. The reason being, if you look at rental yields in, let's say, high-end residential areas, that's quite low. You're looking at levels of 2% and below. Commercial property has been, again, a bit of an oversupply in that sector. So rental yields are not as competitive. So for us, it's not saying that the real estate sector is a problem. We're just saying that compared to the different other opportunities in the market, you're more likely to get a bigger bang for your buck elsewhere.
This sentiment is coming at a time when, of course, there's a deficit, as we mentioned earlier when we were talking about matters of affordable housing. The demand is there for housing, but as you say, it is not as profitable as the other investment options. So as an investor who is looking to invest this year, what options exist for them?
So affordable housing still remains a subsector within real estate that has attractive yields. And essentially, what we're looking at is the pockets of opportunities within the country, such as student accommodation, which has really not been fully utilized. If you look at universities, they've done very little development in terms of trying to create student accommodation. So that has actually been left for the private sector, and we're starting to see investors walk into these opportunities. So for us, it's more along still those lines of, I think, student accommodation remains quite big, affordable housing, again, rental yields and escalation of the property remains attractive. And I think that's the whole thing about investing in real estate, because if you can be able to pass an escalation cost, especially on rental income or rental payments, that makes your property more attractive. Yeah.
Right. Kanye, your thoughts?
In terms of housing, I guess we've seen it coming in terms of the yields, like Akelo says, in terms of that reducing over time. People have built their houses, but there are no people, good enough people to take them up. And depending on where you build those houses, really. And it also questions why the government is really focusing on housing at such a time as this, when even from a commercial perspective, people are not looking at housing as an area that would give them much return.
Yeah. Kingo, your thoughts on that?
So about first the demand for housing, where is this demand coming from and who is it demanding? So maybe they are students demanding, maybe there are people from far-flung of counties they are demanding. So first is to understand who is demanding the house and from where. Then I think housing in terms of affordable housing, or rather the demand for housing should be devolved. Because the percentage of those people who are demanding, perhaps there is a county that is not in Nairobi. Then we assume they're in Nairobi and we build the houses in Nairobi, then nobody buys the houses. So if the demand is there, then the issue is to understand who is demanding from where. Because the house must be built where the person has demanded, or it must be supplied where this person asked for the house. So when you look at the particular aspect, maybe it can be beneficial. Then the other issue that my friend talks about, the return on real estate. If you build an entire property for perhaps bed sitters, then or studio houses, we call them that, then the amount of rent that perhaps you can collect around 9,000. So you have around 50 units in a whole apartment. then you're only collecting around not much to even cover your cost over time. So basically the issue is that understand the demand. The government should understand who is demanding. Okay. Then once you have that statistics, then it can be given to investors who can now go and build houses for these people based on where they are their houses.
All right,
yes.
Thank you very much. Gentlemen, that is all the time that we had. I wish I had time to give you closing remarks, but that is all the time that we had. James Akelo, Portfolio Manager at Sanlam Investments East Africa, David Kingo, an economist, as well as Alex Kanyi, partner at CDH Kenya. Thank you very much for sharing your thoughts. My name is Betty Kiptum. I leave you now with Isaac Maura, who is giving his briefing there at KICC. He is the government spokesperson, so let's get back to that. Have yourself a lovely day. Bye-bye.
Not counting the private ones, currently we have 109,020. And this is a clear increase, including the one for ICU. Ladies and gentlemen, 100, and that's why we were not able to cater for these emergencies. But this is basically increasing as we speak. The other thing that also is very clear is that our CHPs, all of them, have smartphones. 100,017 already they have smartphones, and we have gone to places like Lamu, distributing them with the Minister for Health. We have been to Kwale, we have been to Kilifi, we were in Kericho, if you remember. So it is not, this is your story, this is story is Ajaba. Already those people have phones, so they can actually have contacts, they can take information, they can relay, and we are also using technology to even give feedback so that we know what are the prevalent conditions going forward. And it will be very much wonderful, so that we get a lot of information in advance so that we can actually prevent some of these diseases, and also to promote well-being. So, and really want to thank our governors, because they are collaborating in this. They get a 10,000 shilling month stipend, 5,000 from the national government and 5,000 from the county government. So we really must appreciate that collaboration of the two tiers of government. And these funds will also help in terms of tracking information concerning health in all households in Kenya. It is also good to say that under the Linda Mama maternity program, the numbers have increased to 638,541, ladies and gentlemen, accounting to 30% increase. This further underscores our commitment for reproductive and maternal health. So you can see very clearly, Kenyans give, on average, 1 million babies a year. And this Linda Mama program is therefore very important in ensuring that pre, peri, and postnatal care really works very, very well. And we really also like to say it's not just for anything, but it is very important to have a healthy population and that we get more Kenyans, because when you have them and they are healthy and they're delivered in hospital, we are able to track the maternal health of the mother and the child and ensure that all of them are safe. But also, it ensures that then our country has people, the workforce, which is a human resource that's the most important capital for any country's development. And we must also compliment those governors who are also assisting in this, like my good friend, Honorable Irongo Kangata, who has a similar program in Kangata Care, where he actually incentivizes mothers by giving them a certain amount of money when they have to go for their clinics. And we encourage all of the governors to do so. And you can see, we start from the time a child is born, going all the way. Further, for the last 16 months, ladies and gentlemen, the government has been able to increase job creation in the formal sector of the economy from 2.9 million, these are people who have a salary, to 3.1 million jobs. So you can see there's an increase of 200,000 jobs in the last 16 months in the formal economy. Yule ambaye anapatiwa payslip ndio hii. In the informal economy, which employs more people, that is something that is working in progress because that employs 85% of our population. This translates to 6.9% growth in job creation. So 200,000, 6.9% growth, with more jobs on the way as the government hasn't entered into agreements for labor exchange with several foreign entities, including the recently advertised 2,500 positions for nurses in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. It is good to note that in the health sector, we have more than enough workforce, for example, to meet both our domestic and export labor. So the idea that people are saying, oh, if we export our nurses, are we going to remain with people, hospitals without nurses? No, that's not true. We have more than enough capacity because one of the things that we have been doing, we do not link the courses at our various public institutions, that we train people and what the job market requires. So we are always getting a surplus of this. And even in our next briefing, we'll give you the figures. How, for example, now our universities have got over 300,000 students. And every year over 100,000 graduates from those universities. So we have more than enough. And export labor has since then become a very important aspect of our foreign exchange earner. Last year alone, we earned 624 billion plus from these remittances. And we are the third country in the world that has received that kind of money. So you can see we have export labor, people bringing in the dollars, so that then we can, we can do well with our economy. The enhanced National Social Fund (NSSF) savings have actually grown. Listen to this: from 1.4 billion shillings to the current 6.5 billion. This is a very good saving culture. When we took over as the Kenya Kwanza administration, our average national saving culture was only at 7% of any payslip. But if you go and look at other jurisdictions like China, the Chinese save up to 55% of the money that they earn at an individual level. So this increase is by 360%. It is unprecedented, and it is going to help us in terms of even taking care of our older parents. And all of us here at some point will be old. All of us here, some older parents who may be ailing, who may not be able to work the way they used to when they were taking care of us. And so therefore, ladies and gentlemen, this is very, very welcome. And also, in case these resources need to be invested, then Kenya doesn't have to go out there to look for other financing because these monies do exist. And of course, therefore, it will also help in the facilitation of other national programs so that then we all benefit in terms of self-sustainability. Then another very interesting thing that has happened within the last 16 months, ladies and gentlemen, under the Kenya Kwanza administration, is that those beneficiaries of the Inua Jamii program have been able to be increased from 1.2 million people to 1.9 million people. So this administration, under President William Ruto, has been able to add a whole 700,000 Kenyans who earn a minimum of 2,000 shillings every month just to supplement their income at the household level. And these are orphans, and there are many that are in our society. Maybe there are some who are even in this room. They are, vulnerable people because of where they live and their backgrounds, and also children, and also persons with severe disabilities, and also older persons, our senior citizens. So this program is extremely important. 700, and they are receiving their money not through chiefs as it used to be. We are using M-Pesa, so they are saving money. From their daily hustle, from going from one, to go to the county headquarters to pick money. Now it is coming straight to their phones. And that is extremely important because that helps in terms of building our local economies. And also something called asset building. Because if you save your 2,000 shillings every month, then you can buy a goat, you can build a house, wherever. So asset building, and that is creating local wealth, for these families. And that has been happening for quite some time. Please remember that this Inua Jamii program is unconditional, grants, and also there's a component of health, so that then people can also benefit from this insurance fund. The other issue that I also want to touch here and I need to put it very across, as a representative of persons with disabilities, is that the registration of persons with disabilities is now going to be done by directors of health in all the 47 counties, because earlier on it was being done here at the national level, and this will help a lot of unregistered persons with disabilities. The agony of traveling all the way from their villages when they have mobility difficulties like wheelchair users to seek verification and signing of their disability medical assessment reports by the National Director of Medical Services. In fact, we've been having a backlog at Afia House. So now that will be a thing of the past. It will be done in conjunction with the county governments, the directors of health. And then also this centralized system of registration has really disadvantaged many persons with disabilities, and therefore denying them the benefits as per the law. Because the challenge there is, if you are registered, you can get tax exemption. If you are registered and you have a group, you can get a grant. If you are registered and you are a person with disability, you can get an education scholarship. If you are registered, you can also get an assistive device like a wheelchair. If you are registered, you can be given prescription glasses or sunscreen for those with albinism. So really, many now can actually benefit, because this data now will be properly captured by the National Council for Persons with Disabilities, which as at now, after 20 years of existence, because it was started in October 2004, and I was privileged to be a pioneer board member there, only 580,000 people have been registered against the estimated number of 6 million Kenyans with various forms of disabilities. So this is really attributable to persons with disabilities who are eligible shying away from registering, I beg your pardon, because of the long and arduous process, and the uptake therefore becomes very low, but now it's going to rise. So we are calling upon all persons with disabilities across the country, please go and register so that you can benefit from this. The process has also been shortened by the move of onboarding the disability registration services on the eCitizen platform as per the presidential directive. The online registration system is aimed at collecting accurate socioeconomic data for persons with disabilities right from the ward level. Eligible persons with disabilities can now register themselves from the comfort of their homes or smartphones, as long as they have a smartphone or a computer, and they have a signed health assessment report from the Director of Health at the county level, backed by a national identity card or birth certificate and passport size photos to be uploaded. The action saves the person with disability more time, as they need to travel to county headquarters for their services. Already, 3,091 submissions have been made through the eCitizen platform by persons with disabilities since activation in only 1 month. So if you have 3,000 already, you can even round it to say even 3,000 alone. If you are to do in a year, then you can see the numbers, how they will actually escalate to about 100,000. Yet in 20 years, we've only done 580,000. So this is the way to go, and that is why we are calling upon Kenyans to also use the eCitizen services so that they can have Gavam Kononi. Cognizant of the possibility of reversing the gains that Kenya has made in promoting disability inclusion, the government will be in the next cycle of government performance contracting reinstate the disability mainstreaming performance indicator, which had been removed and retired from the performance contracting from all ministries, departments, and agencies. This is a very great gain because that is the one thing that was making all the ministries, departments, and agencies to have a program and action on persons with disabilities. Also, further to it, I am glad to report to the nation that the disability support allowance for all public servants with disabilities has been revised by the Salaries and Remuneration Commission to include more types and categories of persons with disabilities, such as those with low vision, including albinism, and those who draw print nearer to the eye, those who use 2 crutches or walking frames. So the government urges all employees within the public service to take note of this new development, because they'll be earning an extra 20,000 shillings for their personal aids, and for persons with disabilities who qualify as enumerated above, to contact their relevant employers in order for them to benefit from this very empowering development. So it's an extra 20,000 shillings that will help them to get somebody who can assist them. And this is very, very important. So please, watu walemavu, now you have that. And we keep on reviewing this. These are some of the things that we spoke about in the Disability Economic Charter as an administration. And sanitation and irrigation, a lot of good work in government to increase from 10,933. This is an increase of 47.93%, and this is very commendable because more and more people are getting water under irrigation. We have new irrigation schemes, those that were defunct like Bura, Hola, other places like even Ahero. There is now more water, going to that, including the Galana Kulalu, area, over 20,000 acres. And this means that we are drawing closer to attaining our food security under the in rice production, 192,299 in 2000 to 234 and 34 tons is an increase of 47,933 metric tons, which is an increase of 22%. This is aimed to further reduce our rice consumption deficit and importation. Currently, the rice that we consume in this country, we are only able to produce 18% of it. And if you look at our Kenya Kwanza manifesto, we have made a commitment to increase that up to 40%. So when you have an increase from 192,234,000, an increase of 47,000, almost 48,000 actually, it is geared towards that because the food that we import in this country every year is over 500 billion shillings worth. That is money we have. But if we have it locally consumed, produced, then we are also giving more. Further, we small dams, water pans across the harvest, running water or runoff water, and pans that have already been constructed. And of course, it was at 90% or thereabout. Also, the Aurora and Kimorel are also in the pipeline. And so 35 out of the 100, we wanted to do 100 plans under PPP, public-private partnerships. 35 people showed interest. 35 of them people showed interest, and about 4 are in the pipeline, and the rest we are looking at it beyond the court cases of Aurora, Kimorel, and also the Thwake Dam. The other thing that we have also done is to increase the sewerage in urban places by 27%. So 27% was in 2022, but now it's at 32%. So you can see now there's an increase of 5%, and that is helping us to reduce the diseases in the various places in our urban centers, because you have sometimes running sewage getting into piped water. And it is in tandem with our commitment as Kenya Kwanza Manifesto, which is really, really, really aimed at empowering Kenyans and ensuring that there is proper health care. And also, all of this is helping us to empower over 2 million farmers through the raising of the productivity value of key food chains and reducing dependence on basic food imports by about 30%. And as I had said earlier, local rice production from 18 to 40%. The government remains dedicated to fostering positive change, and we are poised to continue with the momentum of economic revival, ensuring a brighter and healthier future for all Kenyans, as was promised by His Excellency the President. The government performance and service delivery roadshow will continue, and the report thereafter to the national for further action in the month of February. I thank you. So, Wakenya, kunayo hapa ambayo ina utendakazi wa serikali ambao kwa miezi 16 iliyopita mpaka mwezi wa Desemba. Sasa hivi jambo la kwanza
siku hiyo.
Ulienda kwa registrar moto yako kujua gari ni yangu.
Hiyo haikuwa kazi yangu.
No, ndio mimi nauliza wewe.
Sasa mimi hapo na hapo kumbe nilikuwa nimegundua my eyes is not see. Why?
So inamaanisha kuwa
why?
Inamaanisha kuwa
shut up,
wewe.
Wewe. Sasa wewe ulikunywa gani?
Mimi nilikunywa hiyo Kill Me Quick.
Hebu niangalie vizuri uniambie kama unanijua.
Ni yuko hapa.
Anakuangalia na nini? Hii ni kazi ya Mungu. Kwa sababu aliambia pasta wetu ameokoka.
Niliokoka kuanzia hapo
pale ulipopotea macho.
Pale nilipotezea macho nikaokokea hapo.
Na macho yakirudi?
Macho yakirudi tutafikiria hiyo maneno mheshimiwa.